Hello and welcome. I'm Mel and I'm here today with Alex, and we're both part of the First Steps team. We're here today to have a conversation as part of our many videos that you may have seen through our resources are in conversation videos where we'll be having a chat about eating disorders, disordered eating, body image through a lived experience lens as well. So we hope that this will be helpful and insightful for people watching, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, I'm Mel. I'm part of the First Steps team. I'm going to be your host through these videos, and Alex is with me today. I'll pass over Alex to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi everyone, my name's Alex. I'm currently 22 years old. I currently study at the University of Derby. My role at First Steps is a befriender, so I support people via email. Today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my journey basically and how I got to where I am today.
Thanks for being here, Alex. I'm sure it's going to be really insightful for people. And I thank you for being here and sharing this, because I realise it's, might not be a particularly easy thing to do, to put yourself out there in front of loads of people. So thank you so much for being here. Where would you like to start, really? I suppose I'd want to ask, when did things start for you in terms of your struggles with food?
Originally, the struggle started when I was about 12 years old. I lost my grandma, who was very close to me. She was kind of like a second mum. And ever since her death, I started to struggle with food. It was the only thing I could essentially control. And it led to me being basically sent into hospital 3 times. So I was put into Sheffield originally, but I was only there for a few weeks because I struggled to cope with the distance from home. So then I came back home and I was referred to Forneywood, which is a mental health unit in Nottingham. I was in there for a few weeks again. I made significant progress, but then I relapsed. And eventually I was put in Newbridge, which is where I received all the help I needed to get better. I was there from March of 2013 to September of 2013. And there I received help from numerous people ranging from occupational therapists to doctors, nurses. I had a whole team that were there really to help me form a better relationship with food again.
So it sounds like you had a bit of a journey, being bounced around a few places before you were in a place that was really the right place for you. And being further away from family, you mentioned as well, that must have been quite difficult.
Yeah, it was very difficult, especially when I went to Sheffield for the first time, because I was very young. I mean, I was 13 at the time, turning 14. So to go to Sheffield, it was the first time I'd been away from my family for such a long time, and I think the stress of that delayed me being able to actually tackle and deal with the problem that I was facing with my food. Luckily, though, when I went to Birmingham, I had a change, and I realised that if I wanted to get better, then I needed to kind of get rid of the distance idea in my head and focus on what I need to do to get better. It was very difficult because being 14 years old, not many 14-year-olds have to deal with such a life-changing experience like that. But it definitely makes you grow up much sooner, and it helps you to deal with things a lot easier, I think, because when you've gone through something like that, the way you deal with things changes, I guess. And yeah, I've just been able to, ever since then, really, my outlook on life has changed, I guess. I think I value life a lot more than I did when I was 14.
You were so young, really, like 13, 14. It's a stage where people maybe don't understand themselves too well. I know when I was that age, I wouldn't have had that kind of self-awareness. So for you to go through what you did, and you would have needed a lot of resilience as well at that time. It sounded like, the last place you went into, that was where you had to put that distance aside, and you really needed a lot of resilience to go at this, at your recovery alone. It's so admirable for someone who's so young. And I guess at this stage, it must be, I'm I mean, I may be making the assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were probably maybe one of the only boys at the time. Is that right? Were there many? Was it mainly kind of girls and women that you saw?
Yeah, correct. And the whole time I was at the unit, I was the only boy. So from March to September, and then when I got discharged, another boy came in and actually replaced me. So it was quite ironic, really, that I was the only one there for that whole time, the only boy there, and then another boy replaced me as soon as I left. But I think the whole journey as a whole, for me, it helped me a lot, because when I was in hospital, I couldn't compare my body to girls, because obviously a boy's body is very different compared to a female's body. And I found that not being able to compare helped me a lot with my recovery, because I had no male coming in that I could compare my body to, because even though I was gaining weight, mentally I still wasn't prepared to accept my body for what it was. And a lot of the girls who were in there, they were still quite fragile mentally, even though physically they looked like they were getting better. They were putting on weight in a healthy and a healthy way. It was very difficult for them, because they all the time, through no fault of their own, the illness that they had would just cause them to compare themselves to a girl that was very poorly and was just coming in and was beginning her journey. So for me, even though it was very lonely being the only boy there, at the same time, I think it impacted me a lot in terms of allowing me to grow quicker, I guess, and deal with the problem I was facing a lot easier and a lot better.
It's really interesting. So in a way, there was a benefit to you.
Yeah.
You found a benefit of being the only boy there. Yeah, and it is, I suppose, funny, ironic in a kind of sad way, that there was another boy that took over you when you left.
Yeah.
And the sort of nature of having this, I suppose, having this like token boy there, because when we talk about eating disorders, everybody tends to think girls and women. They tend to think, slim, young, white girls. And I think that there's way more than that we're not seeing. But unfortunately, a lot of people face a lot of barriers into going to treatment as well. And I feel like there's now a really good kind of, there are a lot of people waving the flag saying, hey, boys and men get eating disorders too. Why do you feel, because I know I could probably see our conversation today was going to focus more on boys and men and eating disorders, because I think that's really important. And so I'm interested if you have any kind of theories as to why that is, that there are less, well, statistics would show that there are less boys than men with eating disorders. But is it that there's less, or is it that there's just less able to come forward and access treatment?
I think personally, from my experience, there's a lot of stigma around men, especially boys, having eating disorders. Because, like you said, Mel, it's very kind of, the stereotype is white, young girl, female, and I think for a lot of boys that puts them off getting the help they need. However, ever since 2013, when I got discharged, like you've said, time has changed since then. There's been a lot more work around helping those men and boys who are struggling to get help actually get help. It's okay and it's acceptable. But I think for a long time, society has always frowned upon boys really having any sort of mental health problem, even outside of eating disorders. It's always been quite difficult for boys and men to speak up, because men are supposed to be macho and not supposed to cry or not supposed to be vulnerable. And I think for me especially, it was very difficult for me to go through an eating disorder, because I always felt like, what was wrong with me? Why have I got a girl's disorder, essentially? Because being in hospital with all those girls, it was like, well, where's the guys? Why am I the only one here that's a boy? And it was extremely difficult, because all the time, people used to say like, oh, you've got a girl's disorder, what's your problem? Why don't you just eat? And it wasn't that simple. And I think it's because, again, it was so frowned upon, a boy having a mental illness like an eating disorder. But I'm very thankful now that more has been done over the years to slowly start to change that stigma, so that boys and men can get the help they deserve. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and anyone can suffer with an eating disorder. You don't have to be a girl. All genders can suffer from it. So any boys and men listening to this, I just say, like, get the help. you won't be frowned upon. You know, there are people out there, very fantastic people out there, who will help you. And you know, I believe that, you know, there's more out there now that allows you to go and just access the services. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, 100% with you on all of that. It's so brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, we're moving in the right direction. I think that gives me a lot of hope. You know, things are really changing now. And I think with social media, as difficult as it can be and problematic sometimes, there's a lot of benefit in that as well. I follow a lot of men in the eating disorder world, like on Twitter and things, who are very outspoken about eating disorders and really fighting that stigma. And I suppose the other thing I want to pick up on is that you said all genders as well, because I suppose it's really, really important that if we think that you had a really difficult time being a boy in eating disorder treatment, I can't even imagine what it must be like for someone who doesn't fit into a gender. You're someone who's maybe gender fluid or trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming in some way, because it could potentially be extra complications of gender dysphoria with body images. There's all sorts there, isn't there? And then just going into treatment and not seeing anyone that looks like you would be an incredibly difficult thing. So I really feel like, you know, part of us having this conversation is another way to kind of say, men and boys, like, you know, please do, like, there is help out there for you, but also anybody else who identifies as any other gender.
The more we talk about it, the more we make issues like this, we bring attention to them, essentially, the more it will help people of all genders really to get the help they need, because no one, you know, whatever gender you may be, should feel discriminated or unable to access help. You know, everyone needs help sometimes, and I think that now we're very fortunate where social media does have its benefits. It does bring attention to services that people probably didn't know existed, and help that they can now get. And I think it's so important that we continue to keep working really on trying to bring equality to everyone, so they can all access services without fear of being discriminated against or fear of not being accepted because, you know, they may be transgender, for example. And so, yeah, I completely agree with Mel there.
Yeah, I suppose it's that anticipated, like, and that fear of, am I going to be welcomed into treatment? Is there a place for me in treatment? And that could stop people getting the help that they need. And the first steps are really priding themselves on trying to be really inclusive in that sense. So we're trying to keep it kind of open doors, like anybody of any weight, with or without an eating disorder, anyone of any gender, anyone of any race. But of course, these issues run like much deeper in our society, and there are cultural things which kind of stop people from maybe even sometimes recognizing that they have an eating disorder in the first place. As you're saying, there might be a denial of sort of, well, I can't possibly have an eating disorder because it's a girl's, you know, people might literally not even think I have a problem with food. I know for myself as well, I certainly didn't think I had a problem with food, with being in a larger body, because, you know, fat people don't have eating disorders. I use that in a reclaiming sort of way, by the way. I know that's not for everybody, but I'm trying to. So I think this is just what we want everybody to know. Eating disorders isn't the way that we see it, of this, you know, skinny teenage girl. I mean, obviously there are those people and they really matter. But I think the view of eating disorders is really very different. And a lot of people aren't even accessing treatment or help at all, because there's so many barriers, maybe cultural, maybe stigma, all these things, not recognizing they have an eating disorder, that stand in the way. So yeah, talking about these things is really what we need to, as we've been saying, this is all part of it. And I have hope for the future. Places like First Steps and many other charities, we're filling such an important gap, because there's so many people who can't get into eating disorder treatment. Maybe sometimes they're told they're not thin enough, sometimes because they don't feel like treatment is for them, and for really long waiting lists. So charities and like helplines and befriending and things, we can fill a gap, we can support, we can. I suppose that takes me on to maybe asking you a little bit about your befriending now. Like now you've sort of in a place where you're helping other people. What's that like for you?
It's very rewarding. Fine, like, can take a negative experience that's happened to me in my life and flip it into a positive, and actually use my own personal experiences to help people with their eating problems, whether it's at the very beginning where they're just having slight issues with some form of their eating, or it's full scale eating disorder, and they've got really bad problems with food. I think it's really useful to see that how people can relate, and I think because you can relate to their problem helps them a lot in terms of helping them to get better and helping them deal with their problems. So yeah, I think it's very rewarding. I've received feedback from the people I support, and it's very heartfelt when you know that you've taken something so bad that's happened to you, and you're actually helping people find their step to get to better. Yeah, it's very, words can't describe, I think.
It's wonderful. I mean, yeah, I've been a befriender as well. I recently finished my befriending, and I'll really miss it because it was such a wonderful experience. It's so great to have been able to build a relationship with people like I did, and help support them, and give something back. But I found it can be an extension of your own sort of recovery or personal development as well, because I found that I was reflecting on myself and my own relationship with food even more through doing that. So it was still like a lived, an extension of my own experience and personal development. And it's just it was just a wonderful thing to do, as you say. Like, words can't really describe it, but I think it's for you an amazing achievement whilst you're, like, don't mean to sound patronizing, but like still quite young. Like, to have been through all that you've been through. You clearly had to grow up very quickly and mature very quickly, going through what you've been through, to now still, at 22 years of age, been helping other people in this. And I think that's quite incredible.
When I was in hospital, a lot of people used to say towards the end of my recovery, you came in as a boy and you're leaving as a young man. And ever since I've left hospital, a lot of people have always said very mature for your age, and it's weird. It's like having a conversation with someone who's 20, 30 years older. I think it's like said, Mel, the experiences you go through at such a young age, it really does. It forces you to deal with your health at an age where a lot of people at that age are just focused on going out and having fun and just being a kid, essentially, transitioning from a kid to a young teenager. So you don't really have to focus on, your health isn't a central thought at that moment in time. And I think for someone so young, it really does change you. I think I'm getting older now, like, my relationship with food is still, I've improved massively, and don't get me wrong, I'm able to enjoy food, but I think it changes how your relationship with food for the better. At the same time, I don't think you're ever truly the same with food again as you was before you had an eating disorder. So I think, even it's weird being 22 and feeling like really mature for this age, because I know people my age who are still very immature and still like to enjoy themselves. And I don't get me wrong, I love to enjoy myself, but I think there's a lot of maturity there that people.
You've reached a place where you sound like you're more comfortable with food now, but I suppose, as you say, that it's something that it fundamentally changes your relationship with food, and I don't think you can go back to ever never worrying about food. I mean, some people don't know what I don't think I know what it's like to actually never really think about food, because it runs very deep. It runs so, from so long ago. But I think that once you've learned coping mechanisms and tools, and have built that awareness of how you feel around food, maybe that's kind of what it is now, is that you recognize what you're feeling, and you've got a toolbox. Is that sort of, would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. I received like the best support, really. I had my own dietitian. She was able to basically coach me on how to essentially look after yourself. And I think that's one of the best benefits of going through this horrible illness, is at the end of it, when you get the help, you really know how to take care of yourself properly. And I think it's knowing now that, even though my relationship with food will never be the same, it's definitely, I'm able to cope a lot easier. And it's just how I'm able to cope is just, I'm able to eat a lot better, and know that I look at food as fuel. And like a car, it needs petrol to work. We as humans need food to keep us alive, to help us function. So I guess yeah, that's how I cope now. I think seeing food as fuel, and I'm still able to find days where I treat myself, but I think it's about, yeah, knowing how to take care of yourself properly. So.
It sounds like you had a kind of really good team around. So you had a dietitian. Did you have a therapist as well?
Yeah, I had I had a psychotherapist, CBT therapist, occupational therapist. I had a family therapist as well. Help rebuild my relationship with my mum and dad and the rest of my family. So help them. Not only because this eating disorder only impacts you, but it affects those around loved ones. So it's really important to build a foundation again with them, because it put them through a lot. But I had a whole range of very fantastic people who helped me to deal with this horrible. It was great. Yeah.
That's it. It sounds like you had some really, really great people, and it's really important, obviously, that families are involved as well. I guess that's why family counselling is so important, and also, like, you know, support for parents and carers themselves, because it is something that affects the entire family. It must have been terrifying for them as well, seeing you, you know, so young going through this.
But when I recovered, I went back to school. I went to a different school because it was too hard to go back to the old school. So I kind of wanted a fresh start. I'd gone through such a horrific thing, and I just wanted to put it behind me and move on. And I think when I started a new school, I was given the option either to go into the year I was supposed to go in or sit back a year. I made the decision to sit back a year because I'd already missed quite a long period of time out of education. So I was already behind everyone else. So I wanted a really good, sharp, fresh beginning. So I went back into year 9. And I met loads of incredible people, you know, friends for life now. But I think it was very difficult to actually transition back into year 9, because people were aware that you were behind. They were like, started asking questions. And eventually I just was very open with everyone. And some people were very accepting, saying, you know, God, the strength you have to deal with things so horrific. Others weren't so nice, but not everyone can be, you know, friendly, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it was very difficult for a long time. But I think the more I was open, I think it allowed me to deal with it a lot easier. And I think I was able to move forward with getting my life back a lot easier as well. But yeah, I had a very strong network of friends that were very supportive and really helped me acknowledge that I'd gone through something terrible. And yeah, so it's very nice to have that.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Yeah, I can see how difficult it would have been to you to integrate sort of back into school. And I guess a lot of people at that age wouldn't understand eating disorders at all. The ones who maybe not so nice. Maybe it was a naivety or not really understanding what it was.
You have to be wary of that for anyone who's watching this, that there are going to be people out there who are going to still question you when you get better. Like, well, you had a problem. And like you say, physically, you know, not all problems are obvious to the naked eye. I think it's about finding that strength deep down to be able to ignore what they're saying and focus on you and you only, and how important it is for you to look after your mental health as well as physical health. And I think it's just to take what people say as a pinch of salt, and some will praise you and accept you and support you, and others will kind of bring you down and question you. It's just because they don't understand, and it's not their fault. It's just the way the world works, unfortunately. I think if you focus on yourself, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, that's so true. As you say, that takes quite a lot of strength to do that. And I suppose building this, you know, the resilience and the strength that you built during the help that you were getting could seem to stand you in really good ground to then have the confidence to move forward and know that the people that maybe don't understand, you know, are maybe not so nice, are the ones that maybe don't understand. I mean, that is also through just a widespread vision of eating disorders, but also what people expect from recovery as well. I think it's just sort of an on-off switch of just like, well, you're okay now, so surely you can just like eat normally. And recovery isn't like that at all, and it's up and down, and it's not linear, and it can be really messy. So I think even people who do know about eating disorders maybe have a certain expectation or assumption about recovery, which isn't always that helpful either. But yeah, as you say, it's really about yourself and your strength and your resilience. That's what I'm really hearing from you today, is that you know, you really built that resilience to be able to know what's right for you and your body, and listen to yourself, trust yourself and trust your body.
a lot of the time we often fight against our bodies, try to ignore what they're saying. But at the end of the day, if you can start to really accept your body for what it is and listen to your body a lot more, you know, your head and your heart will work hand in hand and really work towards allowing you to live the best life you possibly can. I think the more you fight working with your body, the longer it's going to take, I think, for you to get the help and get the better. But I think, yeah, it is about being resilient and knowing that, unfortunately, with this kind of illness, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, it's a long process, isn't it? And I think sometimes that's hard for people to hear. That's hard to say because it runs. It's a very deep rooted thing if you think about all the things, because eating disorders being like a coping mechanism, having to unpick all of that that's come before, all the things underneath, and relationships and whatever, you know, that coping mechanism is for. And with so many people having lots of different factors that come into it as well, it's such a personal, you know, it's why personalized care is so important. That's why it's so good to hear that you had people that worked with you that really tailored it to you as well. I suppose I just want to finish on you know, anything that you would say to anyone with an eating disorder, or like any kind of, I don't really want to say tips or advice, but that sort of thing. What would you want to say to other people struggling?
Whatever situation you're in at the moment, whether it's, you know, at the very beginning, or you maybe just having, it's like at the very beginning, you're just having difficulties around what you might want to eat, or you're struggling to eat, or you may be on the opposite end where you are really struggling really bad with your mental health and you think you have an eating disorder. Or I think at the end of the day, firstly, always get help, because it's important. People will listen to you, people care about you, you know. Always, I know people are often afraid to talk to their mum and dad about their problems, or their family about their problems, but if you have a very strong supportive network, then access it, because that's the most important thing. Two, is to never be afraid to put in the work, I guess. And I think sometimes we're often afraid of taking the big step to help ourselves get better. I think as soon as you've accessed the services, it's about putting in the work and knowing that the journey to recovery, it's a long one, and it's going to take a long time. But never give up, because there was moments where I thought, well, I'm never going to get better. It's taking too long. I'll never form a healthy relationship with food. And I'm a living example that just because it's hard at the beginning doesn't mean that eventually there'll be a time in your life where you can look back and go, oh my God, you know, I went through something horrific, but now I've taken everything I've gone through, and I'm living a life where I can enjoy food again. I can go out with friends and not be afraid of looking at the menu and taking ages to decide what to pick, and calorie counting and things like that. I think it's just be you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the biggest advice. I think if I'd had a service like Befriend, you know, First Steps, it's amazing these services that are now available, because when I was, you know, poorly, I never knew of anything like this. And I think for anyone out there now who may be suffering, all these incredible services, just access them, you know, use them. They're there to help you essentially, and no one's going to judge you. No one. Don't be afraid. That's the biggest advice.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Ask for help.
Yeah.
Reach out. You can do it. That's what I'm taking from this. Like it's tough, but then it's already tough if you're struggling with eating. You know, you're already in that. So you can do that next bit. It will be hard, but you can do that. I think that's kind of the message here, isn't it? You can do it. Thank you so much. I found this really inspiring. I really, really have. So I hope that other people really will too. You know, it's just so fantastic to have these conversations. Yeah, I really thank you so much, Alex.